The blade drops in under a second. Head separates from body with surgical precision. The French Revolution gets the headlines, but the guillotine claimed necks across continents and centuries. Doctors called it humane. Crowds called it justice. 7 cases prove it was neither. From noble blood to commoner flesh, these executions rewrote the rules of power, terror, and what humans will watch for entertainment. If you value documented historical cases like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from historical execution records and court archives. Now back to the story. Number 1. Marie Antoinette, October 16th, 1793, Place de la Révolution. The Austrian princess, who allegedly said, "Let them eat cake," faced the revolutionary tribunal after months in the conciergerie prison. 38 years old, widow of the beheaded king, mother of 2 children she would never see again. The prosecution needed 11 days to build their case. Treason, conspiracy, sexual debauchery with her brother-in-law. The evidence was thin, the outcome was predetermined. Her cell in the conciergerie measured 8 feet by 6 feet. Stone walls, straw mattress. 2 guards watched her day and night. She wrote her final letter at 4 a.m. by candlelight, addressed to Madame Elizabeth, her sister-in-law. The words were defiant. "I die free from hatred of those who condemned me." The letter never reached its destination. Revolutionary officials intercepted it and filed it away. At 11:15 that morning, she climbed the scaffold in a simple white dress, hair cut short to expose her neck. The executioner held her severed head high. 80,000 spectators roared approval. Her body was thrown into an unmarked grave with quicklime to speed decomposition. The crowd fought over pieces of her blood-stained dress. Souvenir hunters paid 3 livres for a scrap of fabric. The executioner's assistants sold vials of her blood for 5 livres each. The grave in Madeleine Cemetery held her remains for 22 years. When the Bourbon monarchy returned, they exhumed her bones. The quicklime had done its work. Only fragments remained. A few teeth, pieces of skull, a garter that had somehow survived. The royal funeral in 1815 was pure theater, an empty coffin draped in purple velvet. The real Marie Antoinette had dissolved into French soil decades earlier. Revolution devours its children. Number 2, Charlotte Corday, July 17th, 1793, same blood-soaked square in Paris. The 24-year-old Norman aristocrat had traveled from Caen with one purpose: kill Jean-Paul Marat, the radical journalist who called for more heads, more blood, more death from his newspaper L'Ami du Peuple. She had purchased the kitchen knife 3 days before the murder. 6-inch blade, wooden handle. Cost her 12 sous at a cutlery shop on Rue Saint-Honoré. She found him in his medicinal bath, treating a painful skin condition that covered his body in weeping sores. One knife thrust to the chest. Marat bled out in the copper tub, while his lover, Simone Evrard, screamed. The blade had pierced his lung and severed the subclavian artery. Death came in minutes. Corday made no attempt to escape. She sat calmly in Marat's study and waited for the authorities. 4 days later, Corday faced the guillotine, red hair flowing over her shoulders. She had written her own defense during her imprisonment in the Abbey prison. Marat was destroying France with his bloodthirsty rhetoric. Her execution would save thousands of lives. The crowd of 30,000 disagreed. They dipped their handkerchiefs in her blood. The executioner's assistant, Henri Sanson, held up her head and slapped the dead cheek. Witnesses swore the face flushed with indignation. Medical experts later claimed this was impossible. Dead tissue cannot respond to stimuli. Her brain was dissected to find the source of her criminal mind. The revolutionary government had commissioned phrenologist François-Joseph Gall to examine the skull. The results were disappointing. Corday's brain showed no abnormalities, no enlarged areas that might explain her violent tendencies. Revolutionary science could not explain why a young woman would commit political murder. Her body was buried in Madeleine Cemetery. Her skull was preserved in spirits and displayed in the Museum of Natural History. Visitors could view the brain of a female assassin for the price of admission. Martyrs choose their moment. Number 3, Maximilien Robespierre, July 28th, 1794, the revolutionary tide turning against its architect. The incorruptible had sent thousands to their deaths during the Terror, 17,000 official executions in 14 months, his signature on the death warrants, his speeches demanding more purges, more enemies of the people eliminated. The daily quota in Paris had reached 50 executions. The guillotine worked from dawn to dusk, then the convention turned. Robespierre's allies were deserting him. The moderate faction led by Paul Barras was gaining strength. The final session lasted 18 hours. Robespierre tried to speak but was shouted down. The deputies screamed traitor and tyrant. At 7 in the evening, the arrest warrant was signed. Robespierre fled to the Hôtel de Ville with his supporters. The building was surrounded by 3,000 National Guardsmen. At 2 a.m, the guards stormed the building. Robespierre was found with his jaw shattered by a pistol shot. Whether he had tried to shoot himself or been shot by a guard named Charles-André Merda was never determined. The bullet had entered below his left ear and exited through his mouth. His teeth were scattered across the floor. Blood pooled on the wooden planks. 24 hours later, he climbed the scaffold with his jaw bandaged in dirty linen. When the executioner Charles-Henri Sanson ripped off the bandage, Robespierre screamed. The sound echoed across the square. His tongue was hanging by a thread of tissue. Blood poured from the wound. The crowd of 100,000 cheered. His blood-soaked head was displayed for 10 minutes. 21 of his supporters followed him to the blade that same day. The terror died with its master. Mass graves in Picpus Cemetery hold the remains of 1,306 victims from those final weeks. The graves were unmarked. Revolutionary authorities wanted no martyrs, shrines, no place for royalist pilgrims to gather. The bodies were stacked 12 deep in common pits. Quicklime was scattered between the layers. Within a decade, the bones had turned to powder. Power corrupts. Absolute power kills absolutely. Number 4, King Louis XVI, January 21st, 1793, the first royal head to fall, the 40-year-old monarch who had called the Estates General an unleashed revolution. 3 years of constitutional monarchy had failed. The war with Austria and Prussia was going badly. The people needed a scapegoat. French armies had suffered devastating defeats at Verdun and Longwy. 20,000 Austrian and Prussian troops were marching on Paris. The trial lasted 6 weeks. 949 pages of testimony. 58 witnesses called by the prosecution. The crimes were clear. Conspiracy with foreign enemies, betraying the nation, using the royal veto to block revolutionary laws. Secret correspondence with his brother-in-law, Emperor Leopold II, had been discovered in an iron chest hidden behind a wall in the Tuileries Palace. The letters proved Louis had been coordinating with foreign powers against his own people. The vote was close. 721 deputies decided his fate. Death won by a margin of 1, 361 votes for execution, 360 votes for life imprisonment or exile. The Abbé Edgeworth gave him last rites in his cell in the Temple prison. The king's final meal was roast chicken and wine. He ate slowly and spoke little. At 10:20 that January morning, Louis mounted the scaffold. He tried to address the crowd of 20,000. The words were barely audible above the drum roll. Frenchmen, I die innocent of all the crimes laid to my charge. The drums drowned out the rest. The blade fell at 10:22. His confessor caught the blood in white handkerchiefs. Souvenir hunters dipped their fingers in the royal gore. The executioners sold locks of the king's hair for 40 livres each. The head was held aloft for 5 minutes. Citizens rushed forward to touch the scaffold planks. Wood shavings soaked in royal blood sold for premium prices. Street vendors hawked pamphlets describing the execution. Illustrated broadsheets showed the moment of death in graphic detail. The entrepreneurial spirit of revolution extended to royal executions. Louis's body was wrapped in a winding sheet and taken to Madeleine Cemetery. The grave was 8 feet deep. The corpse was covered with quicklime and buried alongside common criminals. No marker indicated the resting place of the last absolute monarch of France. His remains would lie undisturbed for 22 years until the Bourbon Restoration. Even kings bleed red. Number 5, Antoine Lavoisier. May 8th, from 1794, the father of modern chemistry loses his head to revolutionary justice. 50 years old, member of the Academy of Sciences, co-discoverer of oxygen, author of the Law of Conservation of Mass. His experiments had revolutionized the understanding of combustion and chemical reactions. The great chemist who proved that matter is neither created nor destroyed, only transformed. His crime was serving as a tax collector under the old regime. The Fermier General had squeezed money from the people for the crown. These private contractors collected taxes and kept a percentage for themselves. The system was corrupt and hated. Revolutionary logic was simple. All tax collectors were enemies of the people. All enemies of the people must die. Lavoisier's fellow scientists begged for mercy. His research was revolutionizing chemistry. France needed his genius. Joseph Louis Lagrange pleaded personally with the Committee of Public Safety. Lavoisier's work on gunpowder production was essential for the war effort. His improvements to saltpeter manufacturing had increased output by 40%. The Revolutionary Army depended on his chemical knowledge. The tribunal judge Jean-Baptiste Coffenhal replied that the Republic had no need of scientists. The revolution was purging France of aristocratic corruption. Individual talent meant nothing. Only ideological purity mattered. 27 other tax farmers died the same day. Lavoisier went 5th in line. His severed head was wrapped in newspaper. His laboratory was sealed and his equipment sold at auction. The revolutionary government dispersed his chemical library. 4,000 volumes on chemistry, physics, and mathematics were scattered to provincial libraries. His experimental apparatus was melted down for scrap metal. Precision balances that had cost thousands of livres were destroyed. Glass vessels that had taken years to acquire were smashed. Revolutionary efficiency extended to the destruction of scientific knowledge. The guillotine had claimed one of the greatest minds in Europe in 15 seconds. Lagrange later said it took but a moment to cut off that head, though 100 years may not give us another like it. The scientific revolution had suffered a devastating blow. Lavoisier's research into the composition of water and air would not be continued for decades. Science serves no master but truth. Number 6, Olympe de Gouges, November 3rd, 1793, Aix. The feminist playwright who demanded rights for women, born Marie Gouges in Montauban, moved to Paris at 16 and reinvented herself as a writer and political activist, author of the Declaration of the Rights of Woman and the Female Citizen. Published in 1791 as a response to the male-only Declaration of the Rights of Man. She demanded voting rights, property rights, divorce rights for women. Her pamphlet circulated throughout Paris. Women should participate in government. They should own property in their own names. They should have legal recourse against abusive husbands. The male revolutionaries were not interested. Women's role was to bear sons for the Republic and support their husbands' political activities. Her pamphlets attacking Robespierre sealed her fate. She called him a bloodthirsty tyrant who had perverted the revolution's ideals. Liberty had become license for murder. Equality had become mob rule. Fraternity had become fraternal slaughter. The Committee of Public Safety ordered her arrest in July. The charges took months to formulate. Arrested in July, tried in November. The charges were conspiracy against liberty and sedition. She had dared to criticize the government. She had questioned the exclusion of women from politics. The trial lasted 3 hours. No witnesses were called for the defense. The verdict was predetermined. Revolutionary tribunals had a conviction rate of 99%. 45 years old when the blade fell, the crowd was smaller than usual. Female executions drew less interest. Male spectators preferred to watch aristocrats and priests die. Women criminals were considered less threatening and less entertaining. Her body was thrown into the communal pit at Arances Cemetery with dozens of other victims. Her plays were banned from Parisian theaters. Her political writings were confiscated and burned. The revolutionary government wanted no trace of her feminist ideas. Women who demanded political rights were dangerous to the new order. They threatened male authority as surely as aristocrats threatened popular government. The irony was perfect. A revolution fought for the rights of man had executed a woman for demanding the rights of woman. Liberty, equality, fraternity applied only to male citizens. The other half of humanity remained excluded from revolutionary justice. Words have consequences. Number 7, Georges Danton, April 5th, 1794, the giant of the revolution devoured by his own creation, the man who had helped establish the Committee of Public Safety, the orator who could sway crowds with his booming voice and theatrical gestures, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, scarred face from childhood, smallpox, bull neck that would challenge the guillotine's efficiency. By spring 1794, Danton wanted to end the terror. Enough blood had been shed, time to rebuild France. The revolutionary government needed to focus on economic recovery and military victory. The daily executions were creating martyrs and turning public opinion against the regime. Moderate voices in the convention were gaining support. Robespierre disagreed. The revolution needed more purging. More enemies eliminated. Internal enemies were more dangerous than foreign armies. Corruption was spreading through the revolutionary government. Only constant vigilance and regular executions could preserve the republic. The terror must continue until all enemies were destroyed. The final confrontation came in March. Danton's faction demanded an end to mass executions. Robespierre's supporters called for intensified purges. The debate lasted 14 hours. Personal insults flew across the convention floor. Old friendships shattered. The revolutionaries were turning on each other with the same fury they had once directed at the monarchy. Danton was arrested on March 30th. The charges were embezzlement and corruption, secret correspondence with foreign agents, plotting against the government. The evidence was fabricated but convincing. Revolutionary justice required only suspicion, not proof. The trial was a sham. Danton's defense was so powerful, the tribunal refused to let him speak. His voice was too persuasive, his arguments too compelling. His last words from the scaffold were prophetic. "Show my head to the people. It is worth seeing." The executioner needed 2 attempts to sever the massive neck. The first blow cracked the vertebrae but failed to complete the separation. Blood poured from the wound. Danton was still conscious, still breathing. The second blow finished the job. 50,000 spectators watched the blade fall twice. The crowd cheered both times. Revolutionary entertainment had reached its peak. Public executions had become the most popular form of mass amusement. The bloodier, the better. The more famous the victim, the larger the audience. 3 months later, Robespierre followed him to the same scaffold. The revolution had consumed its greatest orator and its most incorruptible leader. The children of the revolution were devouring each other in an orgy of ideological purity. The guillotine had become the final arbiter of political disputes. Revolution eats its fathers first. If you value documented historical cases like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from execution records and revolutionary archives. In 1897, construction workers digging foundations near the old Place de la Révolution uncovered a mass grave, 430 skulls, scattered vertebrae. Lime-stained bones, the guillotine's harvest, finally counted. Among the remains, forensic examination identified 3 skulls with the distinctive damage pattern of double blade strikes. Danton's neck had not been unique. The machine of death had stuttered more often than history recorded. The guillotine was supposed to be science applied to execution. Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine had designed it as a humane alternative to hanging, burning, and breaking on the wheel. Equal justice for all social classes, swift death without suffering. The blade would fall by gravity. No human error, no prolonged agony. Revolutionary efficiency extended even to state-sponsored killing. But the machine was imperfect. Dull blades, misaligned victims, thick necks that resisted the steel. The executioner's assistants kept detailed records of malfunctions. 43 documented cases of incomplete decapitation during the Terror, bodies that twitched after the head was severed, hearts that continued beating for several minutes. The science of death was messier than revolutionary theory suggested. The bones in that mass grave told a different story than the official records. History had sanitized the revolutionary executions, made them clean and quick and painless. The archaeological evidence suggested otherwise. Skull fractures, cervical vertebrae split lengthwise, blade marks on shoulder bones where the guillotine had missed its target. The machine of revolutionary justice had been as brutal and imperfect as the humans who operated it. Even perfection has flaws.